Is there an intellectual basis for believing in God? Or is being religious just a matter of faith? Christianity invites scrutiny into its claims and its reasons for having faith, and these deserve examination. And what's at stake is the entire credibility of the Bible. In December 2004, it was announced that long-time British professor and philosopher Antony Flew, regarded by many as the world's most acclaimed atheist, had renounced his atheism in favour of theism. This dramatic conversion has been likened by astrophysicist and now one of the world's leading cosmologists, Dr. Hugh Ross, as having the same impact on the academic world as an announcement that Billy Graham had renounced Christianity would have on the church. One of the reasons cited by Professor Flew was the evidence. He admitted that for a long time the growing problem of evolution's inability to explain how life began, or for that matter, how anything began, led him to the inevitable conclusion that it was an inadequate answer in the face of the evidence. And when the human genome code was unravelled, the evidence for design became undeniable. These two pieces of evidence, the existence of life demanding a life source, and the scientific evidence as an extremely complex code in the makeup of the human genome, were enough proof for Professor Flew to renounce atheism. Can we prove God? Some people believe and feel that acceptance of God is entirely a matter of faith, that the scriptures actually claim that it is the truth which is the basis for this faith in Romans 10:17. We have to applaud Professor Flew for having the courage to consider and then accept the evidence. Proof, though, is measured and determined according to the type of claim. The type of proof needed to substantiate a claim involving chemistry is different to the type of proof needed to substantiate a claim made about history. Proof in physiology is different to the type of proof needed for psychology. Proof in philosophy is different to the type of proof required for philology. Proof required for biology is different to the type of proof required for theology. To demand that hard science, physics, biology, chemistry, astronomy, proof tests, be the only acceptable means for testing a soft science, psychology, history, philosophy, literature, is unreasonable. Thus, imposing natural proof tests on supernatural claims is an unreasonable measure and totally inadequate. But where supernatural claims are made which have natural implications, such as the invisible God created all that we see, Romans 1:20, proof takes on the garb of supporting evidence when looking at the natural evidence to support this supernatural claim. The evidence. There have been a rash of very articulate and very passionate atheists such as Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett, who have attacked theism, the belief in God, by attacking religious fundamentalism in their abuse of religious rules to oppress people. This type of God these religious fundamentalists promote is not the God I'm arguing for. C.S. Lewis artfully makes the point in The Magician's Nephew, a part of the Chronicles of Narnia series, that there can be several people confronted with the evidence for God, yet they can interpret that evidence quite differently. Lewis describes Uncle Andrew's direct encounter with Aslan, where he vehemently denied what he was seeing and hearing as making himself look stupid. And Lewis, the former atheist himself, continues, "Now the trouble about trying to make yourself look stupider than you really are is that you very often succeed." Uncle Andrew did. When it comes to proof for God, the evidence is cumulative and therefore acceptable proof. This evidence, or proofs, for the existence of God invites those atheists to consider it, especially for those who claim there is none. At the very least, it should be reasonably concluded that atheism, the absolute claim that there is no God after considering all possible knowledge, is a highly irrational position. The following is reasonable evidence for accepting that there is indeed a personal, omnipotent God as described in the Christian Bible. Proofs for the existence of God. The first proof for the existence of God is cause. Everything has a cause. It is illogical to suggest that something had no cause. This is where the theory of evolution becomes inadequate. It cannot explain how anything began, let alone life. When we consider the evidence that there are things which exist, it logically demands that either something or someone caused it. We can then rule out something as the solution, since we would be returning to the original problem. What made something? This demands that there must be someone who has always existed, that is, they are eternal, and is in themselves therefore uncreated. We don't have to understand this in order for it to be so. faith and thinking are not incompatible. It's just that we have to realise that they both require discipline and exercise. The second proof is design. There is evidence for design. The unravelling of the human genome code was announced to the world as the discovery of the language of the Creator.
You were not a believer early in your life. Why?
It was the way I was raised. I was raised in this remarkable environment by a drama professor father and a playwright mother, surrounded by theater, music, the arts. They were doing the 60s thing, except it wasn't quite the 60s yet. And I was exposed to all kinds of fascinating ways to learn about life and the world and ideas. But faith was not really on the list of things that were talked about. It wasn't that faith was put down or considered inappropriate for other people. It just didn't sort of enter the conversation in my childhood.
What scientists discovered was an extremely sophisticated genetic language necessary for even the simplest life forms to exist. To believe that this level of apparent design happened either randomly or by chance is a mathematical equation of improbability with more zeros than I care to type. The universe displays an amazingly complex level of interdependency, which logically leads to the conclusion that it was designed that way. There are just too many coincidences of such just rightness for it to be a random, haphazard coincidence.
I'm an astrobiologist, and the area that I've done the most work in lately is the field of extrasolar planets. What motivates me is just to examine the conditions necessary for life and look elsewhere in the universe and see if those conditions are met anywhere else. And the answer could be yes, and the answer could be no, and either answer is interesting.
The Earth is just the right distance from the Sun. It contains just the right mixture of chemicals and gases to sustain life. The human body has just the right synergy of internal organs to function, and so on. The third proof for the existence of God is morality. There is intrinsic morality that needs a point of reference. How do we know what evil is? How do we know what good is?
All of us human beings have a sense that there's such a thing as right and there's such a thing as wrong. What a curious thing. Where does that come from? If you were looking for evidence of a God who cares about human beings, not just a God who started the universe in motion and then wandered off somewhere else, wouldn't this be an interesting place to find him? Basically as something written within our hearts, universally in humankind, making us different from other species.
Each of us are born with an innate sense of morality. We each fundamentally know what is right or wrong. It is incredible to consider that no matter what time, culture, geographic location, people, the moral law has universally been acknowledged. This tends to confirm that all of creation bears the fingerprints of a creator who is fundamentally good and right. That is, we each share a knowledge of what is right and wrong, not just because we are taught or conditioned to accept these values, but because we are born with them. The fourth proof for the existence of God is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Skeptics may dispute the historical claim that Jesus Christ rose again from the dead, but they do so with intellectual peril. This is because there is enough evidence to validate it, and it is the point at which all of the history of Christ and Christianity rests. This means that if anything of Christ and Christianity is true, then the physical resurrection of Christ is also true, and the opposite is also true. If Christ did not literally rise from the dead, then none of his history or teachings have any credence. But if the resurrection of Christ can be seen as a reasonable historical fact, based on the fact that there were 500 eyewitnesses and the preparedness of those witnesses to defend their testimony of his resurrection, even at the point of losing their lives, then this is perhaps the most overwhelming piece of proof for the existence of God. And the fifth proof for the existence of God is that the claims of Christ can be experienced. Jesus Christ made some seemingly outrageous claims about the benefits of following him. He offered rest for the weary, nourishment for the hungry, water for the thirsty, resurrection for the dead, direction for aimless, liberty for the oppressed, protection for the vulnerable, healing for the hurting, and salvation for the lost. I was 15 years of age when I accepted Christ, and never have I regretted it. Perhaps the simplest test for discovering the identity of the Creator, that is God, is to employ the scientific method described in Psalm 34 verse 8 and Matthew chapter 7 verse 7.